Welcome back to another episode of Raising the Bar, TKJ Podcast. In today's episode, we hear from Darian Falcon Garcia, owner of FG Funding. Darian, how you doing today, my friend?
Doing fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing great. You having a good day?
Always, you got to wake up with that attitude of gratitude, or else you never know how it turns out.
Totally understand. I appreciate you taking the time, to talk with us and tell us a little bit about your business. Let's just jump right into it. So, when it comes to your business and the industry you're in, what inspired you to start your business within this industry?
Yeah. No, of course, and thank you for having me. First of all, I got into, funding almost by accident. I was in nursing for healthcare for almost 10 years, and I was actually looking to make my first real estate investment. And when I got connected with a developer, he was explaining to me the whole thing of he needed money to finish the project, but he was over leveraged with the bank, and without quick funding, he wouldn't be able to get it. And so we were able to do a joint venture. I contributed, to his project, and with a significant return, within 12 months. Just as I was researching, like what type of partnership this was, because it wasn't like an LLP. It wasn't we created our own LLC to get the deal done. But as I was just researching everything, I realized that there was a whole world of private money lending and hard money lending. And not only for you as a hardworking individual for you to be able to contribute, you know, your cash to deals, but there's a space in between where just by connecting people, you can make, significant change in commissions and obviously fund small businesses to be able to grow.
Okay, now just like every other entrepreneur, you've got to overcome some initial challenges, right? And you're gonna have setbacks. So, how did you overcome your initial challenges?
Patience was the biggest, is a blessing and a curse, because I was blessed to, I've been blessed, like I said, to have a stable career in nursing. And I just knew that there was more for me outside of the hospital, and so, and we've talked about this before of, you as a startup or as a business owner, you have to balance what it takes, to fuel the fire and fuel your business for growth. But, and coming from money, or unless you already have a cushion to fall back on, a lot of people are still in the 9 to 5 and still, working Monday through Friday to fuel their side hustle. But once you start treating your business like a business instead of a side hustle, you'll start to see, good results. You'll start to see the results that you want. It took a long time for me to shift my mind from, yeah, I'm a nurse and this is what I do, but I can also do this for you, to no, this is what I do. This is what we do, overall.
Okay, I like that. So, as you were building and growing and developing, I'm sure you've run across people that may have questions. So, when it comes to advice, what type of advice do you have for aspiring entrepreneurs who are looking to turn their passions into a profitable business venture?
You got to be a honey badger. You got to be a honey badger. You got to bite the elephant one bite at a time, and just be resilient, do whatever it takes ethically, of course, and you got to stay clear-minded and flexible, as you're continuing to grow. One thing that I learned is that the customer will tell you what you want, and this was told to me many years ago, was listen to your customer. And I think a lot of people, especially, because there's a sales portion of business, is you want to diagnose the problem before they finish telling you, right? So imagine you go into a doctor's office and you're telling them, hey, you have stomach pains, and right away they're like, oh, you have cancer, so we need the worst treatment or the best treatment. But you just had a 2-minute conversation with them, right? Like, you're not going to actually know what the customer needs unless you're listening, and you're asking the right questions. And God gave us 2 ears and one mouth, so you can listen twice as much as you speak. Yeah, just the communication, learning how to be a listener, and then just like I said, staying flexible and clear minded.
Okay, now along the lines of leadership, because a lot of what you just mentioned to me says you have to learn to be a leader. So when it comes to leadership, what are the key leadership qualities that you believe contributed to the success of your business?
Communication, communication. It's especially communication in the customer service aspect of business. Customer service can really set you apart, from almost every other business in today's world. We're kind of in a trust recession right now where you really got to over explain almost everything. And, and some people are different than others. Some people like to be involved, in the sales funnel, or, they have all their questions and you can answer them. But I think, laying out the full scope of things before they come to, oh wait, we weren't expecting this, right? Like, what are these terms? What are these fees? Right? Like, well, if you get in front of them, if you're to simplify and explain, then you'll really set yourself ahead of pretty much everyone else.
Okay. Now, I've seen you at networking events and definitely seen you in the community. So, networking is a part of being a business owner. So, what role does networking play in building meaningful relationships? What role have they played on your journey?
Yeah, networking is 95% of our business. Technology is able to give us things like insight to consumer trends, or geo demographics. But like I said, we're in a trust recession right now, especially when it comes to lending. There's nothing like being able to shake hands with people and say, if we can't do a deal, we can always do a deal, right? Like, I'm going to point you in the right direction to make sure that you get the information that you really need. I think in my space, not every product is built the same. We just had a conversation where somebody was really, really, they bootstrapped for the last 2 years, their construction business. uh, And now they're really set on getting an SBA loan. But they didn't realize that getting an SBA loan would create a first position lien for them, right? So now they're going to be capped by that 10 or 15 or 20 year, $350,000 loan that they were getting ready to take out. And they're not going to be able to grow until they pay that off. Right. And there's pros and cons to that. Of course, this be, that's what everybody wants. But, sometimes maybe just some working capital or a line of credit, is really what would make more sense for you, instead of, that larger purchase.
Okay, now since you're in the business of money and I know you understand money, when it comes to money itself, what's one lesson that you've learned about money as a business owner that you believe is not taught in schools?
Like, ties into what I, just mentioned, is a lot of, and I bootstrapped a significant portion of all of my businesses, but it's how to use other people's money. I think the traditional style of thinking is, you become an entrepreneur and just money comes, from all over the place. And, and then you're good. And then you're able to buy $1 million home and Lamborghini, Ferrari, and all sorts of stuff. But there's good debt and there's bad debt, right? If I think a lot of people's largest purchases are mortgages nowadays. And, those are, with the rising cost of homes, those are 3, 4, $500,000 homes where you're tied to that. That's a 300,000 $400,000 purchase. If it's a single family home, it's not going to bring you anything back, right? So, it's really, yeah, of course you can go to a bank and get a mortgage if you've saved enough for cash down, or, you're getting creative with an owner finance type of thing. But I think, it's how to use other people's money to give you money for a lifelong, return. That has not been taught in school, even to this day. I still have siblings, in high school, and I know for a fact that they're not being taught that.
Totally understand. The word I use is leverage, right? How can you best leverage your resources and opportunities that you may see? So it sounds like you've been given some advice on your journey as you built your business out. Can you give our listeners one piece of business advice that has stuck with you while you've been in business?
We've asked for a referral. Always ask for a referral. This is one thing that I learned from Alex Hormozy. You know, I listen, right? And if you ask for a referral, that has the potential to double your business, right? Because you've already done a business with one person, they're going to give you a referral. That referral, if you ask for a referral, there is no competition. You can spend money on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube ads, Google, SEO. I mean, my grandparents have owned a daycare for over, almost 30 years in El Paso, and they've never run any type of ad that I've mentioned it to them a few times. I'm like, did you ever run ads in the newspaper? And how have you been able to sustain for 30 years? It's just word of mouth. They provide great customer service. They're community oriented. They love what they do, so if you just ask, you'll receive,
Yeah, I agree. I tell people you always have to ask, who do you know? Sales 101, who do you know? And it sounds like with your grandparents is they brought value to the market, helping people bring value to the market, whether it be a product or service. That also brings up the word of mouth, and knowing what you do and how you do it is one thing, but being able to bring the value is what people notice. Is something I've noticed through the years. Well, Darren, look, man, a lot of great knowledge here. So when it comes to your business, how can people get a hold of you, call you about your service so you can educate them on how you can help them with their personal life or personal finances and their business?
Yeah, so we do live streams every week. You can join us, to just get more information on what type of business funding products are available. You can always email me, Darian at fgfunding.net. Visit our website, fgfunding.net. Call me, Instagram, Darian Develops. I'm pretty much everywhere. Like I said, like you said, I'm always at networking events, trying to shake hands, kiss babies, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think probably Instagram or our website is the best way to get a hold of us. And yeah, if we can't do a deal, we can always do a deal.
How do we get to the live stream? Is that something found on your website?
Yeah, well, we have different landing pages for that. So if you go to our main domain and you sign up from there, you'll automatically be pushed into our email sequences of, when we're doing live events and how to join and things from there. So if you just go into our main website, fgfunding.net, you'll be pushed into that automatically after you enter your information.
Thank you. Once again, people can learn about money. They can learn about the products and services that you provide that can help them. We got a lot of great information, and I'm sure I will see you at a networking event soon. So much success and many blessings to you as you move forward your business.
Absolutely, you as well. Thank you so much for having me on the show.